Thank you, everyone, for having me. I'm super excited to share this with you today. And I do really like that everyone's cameras are on. That's awesome. That never happens in virtual conferences. And it's something that I miss as a speaker, just getting to riff with the audience. So that's awesome. So thanks so much, everyone. So today I'm going to be talking about kind of my journey through chaos engineering, how I ended up with some of the mindsets I'm at today, and some of the things I learned at Netflix and Slack along the way. So this talk is called Incident Analysis Before Chaos Engineering. So we've all had incidents in our organizations. They're unexpected, they're stressful, they're inevitable, and sometimes the inevitable questions creep up afterwards, especially if we weren't, part of the situation. Like, what can we do to prevent this from ever happening again? What caused this? Why did this take so long to fix? Why did this happen again? Was this human error? And some questions might happen behind closed doors. Like, why couldn't they have tried harder? And why don't they care? Most organizations allow time and space for some form of incident reviews or postmortems. However, the organizations I've worked in and the research done has shown the following responses to the questions of why do you do postmortems? And we got a lot of answers, like, I'm honestly not sure. Management wants us to. It gives the engineers space to vent, or even gives management space to vent. I think people would be mad if we didn't. We have obligations to customers, or we want tracking purposes to see if we're getting better. So I think we can all agree as an industry that some form of post-incident reviews are important, but we don't all agree on why it's important. And yet, even though we know it's important on some level, we don't make efforts to improve that process. And a lot of the time, we don't know how. Incident analysis can be trained and aided, but it has to be trained and aided to be improved upon. And you might be wondering how this relates to chaos engineering, and I promise I'll get there in a second. So post-incident reviews are important, but they're not good. And what's worse, when an incident or an event is deemed to have a higher severity, we tend to give our engineers even less time to resolve them. We give our engineers even less time to complete these post-incident reviews. And this is usually because we have SLAs with customers. However, it's important that more time and space is given to the engineering team even after this SLA is met. In his 2018 keynote at PagerDuty Summit, John Allspot talked to the audience about how the metrics we're tracking today in software, like MTTR, MTTD, number of incidents, are shallow. And he posed an open question to the audience and to all of software engineering. He said, where are the people in this tracking, and where are you? But we haven't changed too much as an industry in this regard. Gathering useful data about incidents or chaos engineering experiments does not come for free. You need time and space to determine it. And today I'm going to talk to you about why that giving this time and space to your organizations can actually work within your favor through multiple true stories, new paths of how you can do this in ways that aren't disruptive to your business, and next steps for you to embark on. And spoiler alert, sometimes a thorough analysis reveals things that we're not quite ready to see, hear, or change. I'm Nora Jones. I've seen these things from the front lines as a software engineer, as a manager, and now as I'm running my own organization. In 2017, I keynoted at AWS reInvent while I was at Netflix to an audience of around 50,000 people about how the benefits of chaos engineering can impact organizations positively, and my experiences implementing at Jet.com and Netflix. After that, I went to Slack and practiced chaos engineering there. And most recently, I started my own company based on a need for the importance and value I saw to the whole business of a good post-incident review, something that can actually really help your chaos engineering efforts internally. However, I saw the barrier to entry on getting folks to work on that. I separately started a learning from incidents and software community. It's a group of practitioners that are actively sharing things they're learning in their post-incident reviews across companies, across industries, in ways to try to level each other up through the industry. I want to share this equation prior to sharing you some of the cases and stories that I have today. Performance improvement in software organizations and in any organizations is a combination of error reduction plus insight generation. And this is from Gary Klein's Seeing What Others Don't book. I highly recommend the book. We focus a lot as an industry on the error reduction portion. That's easy. We can track, MTTR and MTTD, and we can put metrics on some of our incidents and some of our chaos experiments. But how do we actually focus on knowing insights are generated? How do we disseminate those insights to people? We're not great at that as an industry. And we can't actually improve performance without focusing on this side of the equation as well. So today I'm going to tell 3 different stories about the value of incident analysis brought about in separate organizations. These are all based on true events that I've witnessed or been a part of, but names and details have been changed. So story number 1, we needed to make our chaos engineering tools work better. When I was at Netflix, I was on a team with 3 other amazing software engineers. We had spent years building a platform to help safely inject failure into production to help engineers understand and ask more questions about the areas in their systems that unexpectedly behaved when presented with turbulent conditions we see in everyday engineering, like injecting failure or latency. It was amazing, and we were happy to be working on such an interesting problem that we could ultimately help the business understand its weak spots. So what was the problem? Well, most of the time, the 4 of us were the ones that were actually using the tooling as well. We were the biggest users of this tooling that we had built. We were using the tooling to create chaos experiments, to run chaos experiments, to analyze the results. So what were the teams doing that we were running experiments on? Well, they were receiving our results. We were presenting it to them, and sometimes they were fixing the things that we found, and sometimes they weren't. So why is that a problem? Well, we weren't the ones on the teams for the chaos experiments we were running. We weren't the ones whose mental models needed refining or understanding, yet we were the ones who were getting that refinement and understanding. I remember learning a ton about how bookmarks worked and how search worked, but that was the mental model I was refining, and we needed to pass that learning onto the team as well and actively engage them in the process. We were leading the horse to water, but we were also pretending to be the horse. We were also drinking the water. And sometimes teams would use that, but this would last for a couple weeks, and then we would have to remind them to use it again. So what did we do? We started trying to automate the steps that they weren't taking in order to get them easier access to the harder parts of the tooling. However, that part isn't what this talk is about. It's about one of the other things we did. We wanted to give them more context about how important a particular vulnerability we found with the chaos tooling was to fix or wasn't important to fix. If you imagine you're on a team and another team says, hey, this thing is really bad, like this actually part of your system was critical and you didn't think it was, like it ends up on their Jira backlog, right? They're not sure how to prioritize it among their other sprint work. And so we wanted to give them more context. It's not like we wanted to make them fix these things. We wanted to give them more context so that they all had all the context to fit that into their everyday work. So how did we start to do that? To know if something was or wasn't important to fix? Well, we looked at previous incidents. I started digging through some of them, and I wanted to find things like systems that were underwater a lot, or people we relied upon a lot, or systems that were going down that resulted in an incident which was a surprise. I wanted to use this information to feed back into the chaos tooling to help improve the usage of the tooling, to help improve which experiments should be created and which results should be prioritized. However, I found so much more than that upon doing this. Analyzing incidents really did help our chaos tooling, but it helped a lot of other parts of the organization too. It had much greater power than just helping the organization create and prioritize experiments. And spending time on that opened my eyes to so much more, things that could help businesses far beyond the technical. And here's the secret I found out. Incident analysis is not actually about the incident. It's about helping your organization. It is revealing the delta between what your organization thinks they know versus what they actually know, and what you think you're good at versus what you're actually good at. And this can be fed to chaos engineering experiments. It can be fed to OKRs. It can be fed to headcount decisions on teams or decisions to move teams to a separate organization. It can be data that informs some of those decisions, but we have to look for that data. The incident is a catalyst understanding how your org is structured in theory versus how it's structured in practice. Imagine your org chart laid out. Imagine drawing it out. Now imagine who's actually getting pulled into situations. Oh, someone from the console team is always getting pulled into Kafka incidents because they were on the Kafka team 5 years ago, and the Kafka team still needs them. But yet they're also on call for all these console incidents. Do you know things like that in your organization? The incident is a catalyst to understanding where you need to improve your socio-technical system. And the incident is a catalyst to showing your organization what you're good at and what needs improvement. Now, this brings me to story number 2. An incident occurred at 3 a.m. when all the bad incidents occur, right? And I came into the office the next day. I was tasked to lead this highly visible investigation after the fact. It was an investigation that had hit the news. But a senior engineering leader pulled me aside in the office the next morning and said something along the lines of, "Hey, Nora, I don't know if this incident is actually all that interesting for you to analyze." "Why?" I asked. "Well," and they whispered, it was basically human error. Kieran didn't know what he was doing and he wasn't prepared to own the system. This was something that could have waited until the morning. This was in an organization that thought they were practicing blamelessness without a deep understanding of it. And when something like this happens, a Kieran makes an error, it's usually met with issuing a new rule or process within the organization without saying publicly that you thought it was Kieran's fault. It's still blame. It's not only unproductive, it's actually hurting your organization's ability to generate new insights and build expertise after incidents. It's also so much easier to add in rules and procedures. It feels good. It feels like we've done something. It allows us to cover ourselves and it allows us to move on, emotionally speaking. These implementations of new rules and procedures don't come from folks on the front line either. This is because it's easy to spot errors in hindsight, and it's much more difficult to encourage new insights, as we talked about that with that equation earlier. Unfortunately, adding new rules and procedures doesn't actually generate insights. It diminishes the ability to glean new insights from the incidents. So what did I do after learning that folks kind of thought this was human error or this could wait until the morning? I pulled Kieran aside one-on-one and I wanted to give him a cognitive interview. Now, here's what I knew going into that situation. According to the org, Kieran had received an alert at 3 a.m. that had he spent more time studying the system, he would have known that it could have waited until business hours to fix it. That was the information I came into my conversation with Kieran with. I asked him from the start to tell me about what had happened. He said, "Well, I was debugging a chef issue that started at 10 p.m. And when we finally got it stabilized, I went to bed around 1:30 a.m. At 2 a.m., I received an alert about a Kafka broker being forked." So that led me to interesting finding number 1. Kieran was already awake, he was tired, and he had been debugging a separate issue all night. Then I asked him what made him investigate the Kafka broker issue. He said, "Well, I had just gotten paged for it, and my team just got transferred this on-call rotation for the Kafka broker about a month ago." I asked if he had been alerted for this before. He said, "No, but I knew this broker had some tricky nuances." And that led me to interesting finding number 2. Kieran's team had never previously owned this Kafka broker. And I wondered how on-call transfers of expertise work in this organization. How do we prepare the new team to own this? Then I asked him how long he's been at the organization. He said 5 months. Interesting finding number 3. Kieran was new to the organization and was on call for 2 separate systems in the middle of the night. I think I would have done the exact same thing in Kieran's shoes. I would have responded to that page in the middle of the night. Doing this cognitive style interview led to all these interesting findings and allowed us to do organizational changes based on some of these interesting findings rather than just adding in gates, right? And this brings me back to the point I made earlier in that post-incident reviews are important, but they're not always good, especially when they're really emotionally charged. It's important to create a psychologically safe environment to be able to ask these questions for folks. I want to share some of the process that I've used with doing post-incident reviews before. Analyzing separate channels, doing individual interviews to understand what people's understanding of the event was, what stood out for them as important, what stood out for them as confusing, ambiguous, or unclear, what they believe they knew about the event and how things actually work versus what they believe others don't know about the event. These are all things that post-incident reviews can reveal if you're asking the right questions and you're looking at the right data sources. Now, I mentioned cognitive interviews before. Cognitive interviews and perspective gleaned in early interviews can point to important new topics to continue exploring, like relevant and ongoing projects, like other pressures people were under. It can reveal past incidents that were related or past experiences that were related. And you can look through all these sources of data to glean some of these insights too. And doing this can iteratively inform and contrast the results of cognitive interviews with other sources of data. So it's not just talking to Kieran, it's looking at all these sources and forming a better story that you then share with your organization to disseminate insights and to generate insights. So this brings me to story number 3. And this is one of my favorite stories. Promotion packets were due. I worked at an organization that had been working on this promotion process for quite a while. And what they learned during that promotion process, or basically in the promotion process, managers had to put up packets for their employees to get promoted. They had to make a case like so-and-so has, pushed all the PRs that they had committed to at the beginning of the quarter, and all their stuff is in production and they're doing a great job. And they had to make cases for their teams. Now, as you can imagine, in a big organization, these packets get gone through really quickly, and it's probably looked at via metrics. Now, what we were seeing around the time promotion packets were due was about 2 weeks later, we saw incidents shoot up. And you might be wondering why that is. And people were trying to push all the things that they had committed to at the beginning of the quarter. And they were trying to do that all at once. And so this is an example of how looking at incidents and looking at data from incidents can reveal organizational things that might not be going the way that we planned. We were creating unintentional incentive structures to get people to push code that maybe they weren't quite done with, or maybe it wasn't quite ready, in order to check a box. It's not like anyone was doing anything wrong. It was the system we created, and the system needed to be changed. A good incident analysis should tell you where to look. Now, I want to show you a sample of something that we've been working on at Jeli. You might be wondering where one would look here. So this is a particular incident where you can see message volume and chatter via certain people. Now, some of the ways that you might interact with this graphic are: you might be interested in the absent chatter when people weren't talking. You might be interested in the tenure of folks on a particular team and their participation level in the incident. You might be interested in all the different teams that participated in the incident and whether or not they had worked together before. You might be interested if we've relied on folks that weren't actually on call and we needed to unlock their tribal knowledge, right? What did they know that the folks that were on call didn't know? You might be interested in looking at folks' tenure and if they vested or not. What knowledge are they going to leave, or are they going to leave with when they leave the organization? A good incident analysis can actually help you with a number of things that we might not even have thought of before. It can help you with training. It can help you with headcount, planning promotion cycles, doing some quarterly planning, unlocking tribal knowledge, and feeding that into our chaos experiments. If we had an incident that had all these people that weren't actually on call that were saving the day, that would be a good indication that we should run a chaos experiment later with none of those people. How much are coordination efforts during incidents actually costing us, right? How many hops does it take to get the right people in the room? Which kinds of incidents should be given more time and space to analyze? Maybe not every incident is worthy of such a thorough analysis or worthy of a cognitive interview. So what do these types of incidents look like? Maybe if there were greater than 2 teams involved, especially if these were teams that had never worked together before, and now they're working together under an intense situation. Maybe it involved a misuse of something that seemed trivial, like expired certs. I bet everyone here has had an expired cert incident that seemed very trivial. We all have. or the incident was almost really bad, where we had a moment that we were like, phew, I'm so glad no one noticed that. That's a good indication that we should dig into it further. Or it took place during a big event, like an earnings call or something else. If a new service or interaction between services was introduced, or even if more people join the channel than usual. Like, why is this a hot button topic in our organization? Why are 300 people joining the Slack channel for this particular incident? So when are we ready for kind of a more thorough incident analysis? I would actually argue that before you're doing chaos engineering, you should be doing some incident analysis to help improve your chaos engineering efforts. And I also think having customers means you're ready to benefit from some incident analysis. Your business will be better for it. So what can you do today to improve incident analysis? Well, you can give folks time and space to get better at analysis, and this can be trained or aided. You can come up with different metrics, like looking at the people, who was involved, have they been involved before, how often are they on call? Are they on call for a lot of different services? What do we rely on these particular people for? Doing investigator on-call rotations for people analyzing the incident. It's actually really beneficial to have a third party analyze the incident that didn't participate in it because they have this unbiased view. It's the same with chaos engineering experiments. I always recommend having a facilitator that's not actually participating in the chaos experiment if you're doing a game day type thing. Allow time for some of the big ones too. And how do you know if this is working, right? Well, more folks are reading the incident reviews and more folks are attending the incident reviews. You're not seeing the same folks pop into every incident, and folks feel more confident. And you can ask folks these questions, like, how were you feeling before this incident with this system? Or how were you feeling before this chaos experiment with this particular system? Maybe teams are collaborating more. There's this better shared understanding of the definition of an incident. I actually ask feedback questions after sharing some post-incident reviews internally at organizations too. And here's some real pieces of feedback that we've received after doing different types of incident reviews. Like, I just changed the way I was proposing to use a particular piece of software in a design as a result of reading this document. And I've never seen such an in-depth analysis of any software system that I've had the pleasure to work with. You want to get people engaged in it. You want to tell a good story. And telling a good story means people are feeling heard. Now, what are the components of a strong post-incident process? Well, an incident occurs, of course, and then you assign an investigation to a third-party investigator, and then doing an initial analysis by the investigator to identify opportunities, maybe people to interview, an analysis of disparate sources. Maybe doing those interviews and then aligning with folks on the themes behind them. Now, 4 and 5 are quite hard. And sometimes folks spend about 20 minutes prior to the meeting participating in a post-incident review prep. Sometimes folks spend longer. It's hard to put on another hat after we've been coding all day and do all this analysis to try to, dive into some good themes. The company I started, Jeli, is actually helping with 4 and 5 so that you have shoulders to stand on in the beginning. If you're looking for further resources on incident analysis or some chaos engineering techniques, I would highly recommend the learningfromincidents.io website or the Error of Counting Errors by Robert L. Wares. And then we also run some workshops and opportunities, so you can email me at nora@jeli.io. And that is it. Thanks so much.